The year 1770. The place, the American colonies. 6 years before the Declaration of Independence. The people, the number of slaves in the 13 colonies has increased steadily to reach 450,000, constituting 20% of the total colonial population. In addition, there are more than 10,000 free blacks in the colonies. This is the story of the courage of these African people and their descendants, of their hopes and dreams, their flights to freedom, their emancipation, followed by the long struggle from 1770 till today up the road toward equality, civil rights. From then until now, this history is filled with the contributions that black Americans have made to the United States for more than 200 years, despite their being treated as second-class citizens, at best, for most of that time. Remain for a moment in the year 1770. It is then that the first of Crispus Attucks, felled by a British musket as he and his white and black comrades charged the British soldiers on Boston Common. 1775 to 1781. More than 5,000 black Americans fight bravely in the Revolutionary War. Slave and free man, they line up with white Americans at the battles of Lexington, Concord, Ticonderoga, and Bunker Hill. Black men are with General Washington when he crosses the icy Delaware to capture Trenton. A few of them are volunteers from the North and South. Some win their freedom with their courage, but others go back to bondage under the heels of plantation owners. However, protest among slaves and in their behalf is increased by the Revolutionary War and by the ideals proclaimed in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal and are endowed with certain inalienable rights. How hollow these words are for Southern slaves, often working 18 hours a day in the fields, who find lofty words no relief from slave auctions and chains. 1787. When the Constitution of the United States is being written in Philadelphia, the South will approve it only if slavery is not made an issue. The city of Washington is laid out as a new capital of the United States. Benjamin Banneker, son of a freed slave and a well-known scientist and surveyor, is one of the three-man team headed by Frenchman Pierre L'Enfant. Designing Washington as a beautiful, unique city. When L'Enfant is fired and unexpectedly takes all the charts and maps with him, Banneker solves the problem by an incredible feat of architectural mastery, reconstructing from memory every line and circle of the complex plans. The 1790s. Why is the number of slaves growing so rapidly? The main answer lies in the invention of a Northerner, Eli Whitney, whose cotton gin vastly increases the profitability of slave labor and makes cotton very big business as the cotton revolution spreads all through the South. Slave catchers set up a profitable trade throughout New England, tracking and recapturing valuable runaway slaves. But there's a heavy outcry against this practice, and anti-slavery sentiment began spreading slowly through the North. War of 1812. Hundreds of blacks fight under General Andrew Jackson, who praises their courage. Part of the naval forces at the crucial battle of Lake Erie is black, honored for bravery under fire. It is 1830. The Southern slave economy now has 3 million blacks in bondage. The American Anti-Slavery Society is founded in the North, and in only 7 years has 250,000 members in 15 states, including many free blacks. The South is enraged. 1830s to 1840s. Abolitionists and church groups, especially Quakers, push for black education. Southern whites, many of them slave owners themselves, are sentenced to jail for teaching slaves to read and write. Mobs sometimes invade schools, burn books. 1840 to 1850. Thousands of blacks escape to the north, fighting enormous odds. Trailed by slave catchers, many blacks drowned in rivers and swamps. Thousands of men and women in the North and South devote their lives to emancipation, but they face increasingly greater odds. With the most discouraging counterblow of all, the new Fugitive Slave Law of 1850, forcing federal marshals to arrest suspected fugitive slaves. For half a century, from 1810 to 1860, white and black abolitionists in both the North and South secretly helped more than 100,000 slaves steal away to freedom in the North. Harriet Tubman, a South Carolina runaway slave, is the symbol of the Underground Railroad. She makes her own escape in 1840, hiding by day in barns, wading rivers at night, wet and hungry, with only the North Star to guide her, eventually reaching Philadelphia. The stations of the highly organized Underground Railroad are a series of barns and cellars in the South and North, about 21 miles apart, where escaping slaves hide and are fed during the day. Tubman makes 19 trips, risking her life to bring out more than 300 slaves, knowing there's a $60,000 price on her head, dead or alive. Another famous escapee is Frederick Douglass, born a slave in 1817. Eventually, he's to become the most important and eloquent black abolitionist of the 19th century. As a boy, he is taught to read and write by a kind mistress in Baltimore. Back on the plantation, despite hunger and beatings, he never loses faith that he will someday be a free man. At 21, he escapes from Maryland to New York, and only 3 years later, he's a powerful abolitionist lecturer, soon known nationally for his speeches against the inhumanity of slavery and for the right of blacks to vote and equality for women. Sojourner Truth, another noted black abolitionist of this time, also escaped slavery to become an important lecturer not only on black freedom, but also on women's rights. During the Civil War, 500,000 slaves escaped from southern plantations and passed through Union lines into a North that generally is not very sympathetic. When Union armies press deep into the South, they are followed by blacks eager to work and fight. But the average Northern soldier doesn't want contact with blacks, despite the fact that trained black regiments are courageous, tough fighters. In major northern cities, many free blacks are beaten and lynched when whites riot, fearful that blacks will take the jobs of whites who are drafted for war service. Whole blocks of black businesses are smashed and burned. Horror reaches its height in the riots in New York City, and the colored orphan asylum is destroyed. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863 has freed slaves from states in rebellion against the United States. But in the border states are almost 1 million slaves not affected. It is not until the Civil War ends in 1865 that the 13th Amendment to the Constitution forbids slavery anywhere in the country. Almost 200,000 black Americans serve in the Union Army and Navy, with almost 40,000 killed or missing in action. Only 25 blacks become officers. 21 blacks win the Congressional Medal of Honor for heroism. White Union soldiers are paid $13 a month. Black soldiers only half that much. Lincoln later remedies this at about the same time that the Confederacy announces loudly that it will shoot all captured blacks in Union uniform. A number of free blacks and slaves in the South fight for the Confederacy. A few of them are volunteers, and some slaves win their freedom this way. When the war is over, most people in the North believe that blacks should be free, but very few believe that blacks should vote. However, for the moment, voting is not the first priority for helping blacks in the unfriendly post-war South. Assisting ex-slaves get land, tools, build homes and schools. These are the difficult primary tasks established by the Freedmen's Bureau of the Army. But progress is slow, mainly because segregation is still the order of the day in the shambles of a defiant South. Black communities spring up rapidly in New York, Boston, and other key cities. Freedmen's societies provide funds for books and teachers for former slaves in both the South and North. Most abolitionists strongly protest segregation in both North and South. But adding to the confusion, other abolitionists are not concerned with segregation as an issue, but only with freedom from slavery. Despite these differences, the beginning of free education for blacks comes out of these early efforts. The Freedmen's Bureau distributes food and medicines, and later builds 4,000 schools, where teachers risk their lives in an angry South to teach black children. 1867, resistance to giving blacks the needed help results in the federal government placing 10 southern states under the Reconstruction Act. Deep animosities flare. Some Southerners charge that abuses by federal occupation troops are as brutal as the problems they're trying to resolve. 5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, all blacks are granted citizenship by the 14th Amendment. But enforcement of the law is another matter. Most Southerners and many Northerners still refuse to treat black Americans as fellow citizens. So blacks rebel, only to face race riots in many Southern cities. Hundreds die in the clashes. In 1870, the 15th Amendment is passed, asserting that the right to vote shall not be denied on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Northern troops and the Freedmen's Bureau speed south to supervise voting procedures. Angry Southern whites use secret terrorist groups, especially the Ku Klux Klan, to intimidate blacks. The Klan's hooded night riders terrorize with fire, tar and feathers, and lynchings. Blacks learn the hard way. If they vote during the day, they risk being flogged at night. But black votes finally count, and 8 southern states send some black Americans to Congress in the 1870s. Primarily ministers and teachers, deeply concerned with helping to rehabilitate the entire war-ravaged South. All through the South, the right to vote is endangered by new poll taxes and unfair demands that blacks be able to read if they want to vote. In the meantime, early labor organizations in the South and North bar blacks from membership. Blacks get the worst jobs and are paid less for the same work. With jobs scarce, crops failing, and the Klan burning crosses, black Americans by the thousands leave the South and head to newly opened public lands in Kansas and Oklahoma, only to find that conditions there are not much better. Black demand for education increases rapidly after the Civil War. In a few northern communities, there's formal schooling for blacks. But the South remains hostile, and often black schools are burned. From 1875 to 1900, it's generally accepted by whites that there will be no school integration in the South or North. At this point, there's a pioneer in black education, Booker T. Washington, who begins by accepting that school segregation is a fact of his times. Born a slave, he teaches himself to read as a boy, fighting to get an education, and eventually establishes the Tuskegee Institute when he is only 27. He makes Tuskegee a school to produce black teachers for black children, so badly needed in the South. Students build the institute as they study. Booker T. Washington emphasizes industrial education along with academics. As the institute becomes a model for education that combines training in the trades with cultural studies, Washington is criticized for not fighting politically in behalf of black rights. But he knows it's not easy to walk the razor's edge between black pride and white prejudice. The first major population shift comes before the turn of the century. Thousands of black Americans move north, hoping for a better life. What they find usually is that whites are uneasy and frightened, worried that blacks will take their jobs. The legacy of slavery, North and South, is racism. Hostility develops into hundreds of race riots. Blacks learn a bitter lesson, that Northern violence isn't any different from Southern violence. Angry demand for punishment of lynchers grows into a major black American crusade by the end of the century. One key figure of the crusade is Ida B. Wells, outspoken journalist, who runs for her life from her newspaper office in Tennessee, barely a step ahead of a shouting white mob. Protesting against the North's indifference to Southern savagery, she calls the world to witness that the Ku Klux Klan is driving black Americans away from the polls, and that blacks are being publicly whipped and lynched. She cries out nationwide that defenseless black businessmen are being arrested on trumped-up charges and hanged. Nevertheless, by the turn of the century, black businesses increase in the North and South, all catering to a black clientele. 1893, a 37-year-old black surgeon, Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, performs the world's first open-heart surgery, long before X-rays, blood plasma, or modern operating equipment. Sewed up his heart, one headline exulted. At the end of the 19th century, dozens of black inventors are taking out hundreds of patents on a wide range of important discoveries that make revolutionary changes in U.S. business and industry. At Tuskegee Institute in the late 1890s, the world looks with wonder at the amazing scientific work of Dr. George Washington Carver, black chemist and botanist. From the peanut and sweet potato, overproduced throughout the South, Dr. Carver synthesizes hundreds of highly useful products, such as linoleum, soap, and flour, eventually bringing millions of dollars to farmers and industry. Dr. Carver's techniques for creating synthetics and for increasing crop productivity, which he shares with the world, stimulate and redevelop the lagging agricultural economy of the entire South. When Dr. Carver dies, few knew that the dedicated black scientist had almost died when he was a spindly infant. Night riders had kidnapped a black girl to sell into slavery, but they had no use for her sickly baby. So they tossed the tiny boy into a rain-soaked garden near the porch of a small farmhouse. Rescued by the white farm family, the terrorized child was given warmth and encouragement and a name. It seems a miracle that eventually the half-lifeless little lad became one of the greatest scientists of America. A new judgment by the Supreme Court in 1896 provides for separate but equal accommodations and education. This no-win decision by a largely northern court actually serves to justify and increase public segregation. In the Spanish-American War in 1898, black Americans fight and die in large numbers. However, it is rare that they battle side by side with white soldiers, for the War Department is still firmly opposed to integration. But the groundwork for integration is slowly being laid. The 20th century will see the rise of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Black Bid for Labor Organization, black experience in World Wars I and II, and the dynamic effect on America of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s nonviolent civil rights revolution. As the 20th century goes past its halfway mark, the crusade for civil rights goes on. The aim is to eradicate the color line at last and to diminish the glaring disparities between white and black communities in average income, education, housing, employment, and health, as well as to deal with the new problems in the interaction with other minority groups. In 1963-64, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has a primary goal: push for black voting registration throughout the South with the help of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Eventually, 500 blacks were arrested, 300 jailed, as Alabama Governor George Wallace pledges segregation forever. Dr. King himself is thrown in jail many times, sometimes into solitary confinement, unable to talk even to his lawyer. In Virginia, 47 peaceful demonstrators are beaten badly, end up in the hospital. High-pressure hoses and cattle prods are used on blacks in Alabama. NAACP's field secretary, Medgar Evers, shot to death in front of his home in Montgomery. But the overall statistics for the nonviolent black movement are impressive. 930 protest demonstrations in 115 cities in 11 southern states. Dr. King's message captures world attention when he is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964.
Oh, the Nobel Peace Prize.
The methods of nonviolence advocated by Dr. King are too slow for some angry black militants who demand equality immediately. In the hot summers of the mid and late 1960s, impatience explodes in the urban ghettos. Fire spills into the streets in more than 100 cities across the country. Violent messages of despair and anger, not to be contained by counsels of moderation by those feeling less pain. Eventually, the flames of rage subside as the focus shifts to a collaborative search for jobs, educational opportunities, housing and funding for needed health programs and cultural activities. Dr. King is only 39 years old when destiny leads him to Memphis to participate in a demonstration by city sanitation workers.
We must let the nation know, and we must let the world know.
While in Memphis, Martin Luther King Jr., world spokesman for peace, hope, and love, and progress, is assassinated. The nation is in shock. But the dream of the prophet of nonviolent revolution lives on, and on his birthday on January 15, 1986, almost 2 decades after his death, America observes a new national holiday as a bust of Dr. King is unveiled in the rotunda of the Capitol. Encouraged by the March on Washington, the NAACP and other black organizations are strengthening their lobbies to get the 1964 Civil Rights Act through Congress and signed by President Johnson, despite bitter opposition by many Southern congressmen. It's a landmark in the fight to stop racial injustice against all minorities. It forbids discrimination in hotels, transportation, theaters, restaurants. It authorizes use of government funds in support of educational desegregation. It prohibits private employers from discrimination on the basis of race or sex. But making it work is another matter. The Reverend Jesse Jackson joins the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and takes a forceful role in Dr. King's nonviolent demonstrations in the 1960s. After Dr. King's assassination, Jackson establishes PUSH, People United for Serving Humanity, to encourage business to invest in minority business enterprises and to promote education for black youth. Years later, when Jackson has a national reputation, he runs for president in the 1984 primaries. Most people feel it's doubtful he will win the Democratic Party nomination. Instead, many see Jackson's presidential bid, his Rainbow Coalition, as a platform from which to speak out for all minorities, at home and abroad. As school segregation lingers, the federal government begins enforcing educational equality by threatening to withhold funds from schools that do not comply. Another method used is busing, shuttling both white and black students to other schools in an attempt to assure racial balance. Black and white officials recognize that sometimes busing works. Sometimes it does not. Concerned citizens point out that it is essential to realize that true equality for black Americans will come only with improved education and training, more jobs, more financial investment by whites, and affordable housing for minorities. In the early 1960s in Massachusetts, Edward Brooke III becomes the first black to be elected Attorney General of a state. Next step up for him is the U.S. Senate, the first black American to be elected to this position since the days of Reconstruction. Reverend Andrew Young, first, years ago, a minister among the poor in rural areas of Georgia. Then, a strong backup to Dr. King in the nonviolent fight for civil rights. He is elected to Congress in 1972. Then, President Carter appoints him ambassador to the United Nations. Later, he wins the election for mayor of a major southern city, Atlanta, Georgia. As black power increases in the 1970s, about 100 black mayors are elected in cities of all sizes, some with heavy white support. Presidents Johnson and Nixon appoint Walter E. Washington as the commissioner and chief executive for the nation's capital. And in 1974, he is elected mayor. Tom Bradley, a former policeman, serving as mayor of Los Angeles, the second largest city in the USA. He will eventually be nominated twice for governor of California. Thurgood Marshall, first black justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, appointed in 1967, has spent his life working for the legal rights of all minorities. He gained his judicial experience as chief legal counsel for the NAACP. And what of black Americans in the arts, music, literature, theater, and sports? Here are just a few of the men and women who, in spite of the tremendous difficulties facing them and their parents and grandparents, opened the doors for future generations. W.C. Handy, father of the blues, cornet player and composer, helps the new black musical art forms of ragtime, blues, and Dixieland jazz command nationwide attention. Louis Armstrong played ragtime and Dixieland in the honky-tonks of New Orleans while still in his teens. He's said by some critics to be the greatest single figure in the history of jazz. Dean Dixon, first major black American conductor with the foremost symphonic orchestras in the world. William Grant Still, composing for the leading orchestras and opera companies around the globe. Duke Ellington, recipient of the Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award given by the United States government, makes a profound and lasting impression on American music. Ray Charles, blind musician, singer, and international recording artist, winning acclaim for his jazz, blues, and gospel music. Langston Hughes, poet, novelist, playwright, is the most important black literary figure of his time. James Baldwin, born in a Harlem tenement, skyrockets to international fame with his angry novels and bitter plays and his masterly indictment of modern racism in The Fire Next Time. Richard Wright, son of a Mississippi sharecropper, becomes one of America's major authors. Gwendolyn Brooks is awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1950. Marian Anderson, brilliantly talented contralto, burst through racial barriers to become the first black singer at New York's Metropolitan Opera. Back in 1939, when the Daughters of the American Revolution in Washington refused to permit her to sing in Constitution Hall, she's invited by the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, to sing instead in front of the Lincoln Memorial to a cheering, deeply moved interracial audience of 100,000. Paul Robeson, a giant of a man, elected to the College Football Hall of Fame, internationally known concert singer of folk music and star of stage and screen. He was a great voice opposing racist repression. Ethel Waters, actress and singer, emerged from the Philadelphia slums to prominence on Broadway and in Hollywood. Nat King Cole, one of the most respected entertainers of the post-World War II era, and to this day, as a singer and jazz piano virtuoso. Leontine Price, prima donna of the Metropolitan Opera and charismatic actress. Her sumptuous voice has been especially enjoyed in her performances of Verdi's great heroines. Academy Award winner Sidney Poitier stars in many memorable films of great dramatic impact. Katherine Dunham, anthropologist and dancer, wins worldwide acclaim with her own dance company. Dick Gregory, stand-up comedian who criticizes racism and poverty, puts aside a successful career to join in civil rights demonstrations across the country and abroad. The works of master painter Henry O. Tanner are displayed in the great galleries of Europe and America. Jacob Lawrence, considered by many art critics as one of the foremost painters of America. Richmond Barthé, the first black American to rank with the best sculptors of the 20th century. Gordon Parks, photographer, author, composer, filmmaker. His major subject, the injustice experienced in growing up and working as a black artist in America. Jesse Owens, called the fastest man in the world, blazes to 4 gold medals at the 1936 Olympics in Hitler's Germany. Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier in professional baseball. America's foremost sport is integrated today because of this determined son of a sharecropper. Althea Gibson, first black woman international tennis star. Arthur Ashe, the #1 ranked tennis player in the world in 1968 and 1970. Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, heavyweight champion of the world, successfully defends his title 25 times in 11 years. Soon another world champion boxer appears on the scene, Muhammad Ali. Being the greatest, as he says, he dominates the boxing arenas for more than a decade. As black political representation grows, the first National Black Political Caucus is held in 1972. More than 3,000 elected black American officials attend. They discuss ways to meet black needs within the existing political framework of the Democratic and Republican parties, rejecting black nationalist slogans, calling for separation of the races. A black political caucus is founded in Congress, and in the late 1970s, black lieutenant governors and more black men and women are elected to Congress. The decade of the 80s begins with black Americans keenly aware that 1/3 of them still live in poverty, and that there is an ever-present need for a continuing and vigorous civil rights movement. Emphasis is on action at all levels of the political process to fight discrimination, inequity, and racism in all their forms. Strong efforts to help correct the severe problems of inner cities nationwide are being made by the National Urban League, the National Urban Coalition, and the National Council of Negro Women, applying ideas and funds derived from industrial, governmental, and corporate groups, black and white. In 1983, an impressive event, the first black astronaut, Colonel Guion Buford, as a member of the Orbiter Challenger team, completes 98 orbits around the Earth.
Thank you. Roger out.
The key to progress is education. Today, black students and faculty are represented at most U.S. colleges and universities, even though black professors make up only a small percentage of the faculty at predominantly white colleges. Prestigious black colleges are noticing a drop in enrollment as more black students attend traditionally white universities. The number of black professionals, both men and women, continues to climb. In late 1985, 15,000 black Americans attend the annual Congressional Black Caucus Legislation Weekend in Washington, D.C. to focus on all the problems that still slow down efforts toward a democracy freed at last of racism. The legal system moves ahead trying to protect blacks. In 1986, the Supreme Court stops prosecutors from ruling out blacks from juries when the defendants are black. In the same year, the Supreme Court starts putting legal muscle behind the 20-year effort to prevent discrimination in employment of blacks and other minorities, including women. The goal of affirmative action is to require employers to use balanced and flexible procedures for hiring and promoting all minorities. As the flow of time approaches the end of the 20th century, prominent blacks assume well-deserved roles throughout most of the structures of American society, though not nearly in proportion yet to the percentage of black Americans in the total population. Lawyer L. Wilder Douglas is sworn in as Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, the first popularly elected black lieutenant governor of a southern state. Harold T. Washington is voted in as mayor of Chicago. In the nation's capital, Marion Barry, longtime fighter for equal rights, is elected for successive terms as mayor. Coretta Scott King, widow of the slain Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., gains mounting recognition as a civil rights leader in the United States and abroad. John H. Johnson establishes and edits the famous magazine Ebony with a circulation in the millions. Marva Collins, a school teacher in Chicago, is recognized as an example of excellence and hope. She does not accept failure from her students and devises an unfailing formula for educational success for her small charges. In entertainment, as in the past, talents of blacks are in the forefront. Stevie Wonder sees the most enchanting melodies in his mind and creates music that inspires young and old. He spearheads the campaign to make the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. a national holiday. Michael Jackson, a musical phenomenon, establishes an outstanding burn center at a Los Angeles hospital when he becomes aware of the urgent need for it. And many people consider Bill Cosby the most successful show business personality of his time. So, we have traveled the road of time for more than 200 years. What have we learned along the way? Among other things, that the blacks and whites of America have built a unique heritage together. Although prejudice is retreating as we oppose it together, it is still here and demands the steady, watchful eye of all of us. Overall, the black experience has made a precious contribution out of its pain, struggle, anger, laughter, and talent. The black fight for freedom, for dignity, equality, civil rights illustrates, in fact, what America's democracy is all about. At its best, American democracy safeguards protest and seeks means to weigh it and meet its just demands. It protects the inalienable rights of each of us to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Without this, we could not keep striving to achieve for ourselves and others the ideal that is emblazoned over the entrance of the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. Equal justice under law. The unending struggle of black Americans for equality begins to take new public forms at the end of the 19th century. As the new century dawns, a two-man American team is applauded in headlines all over the world as the first to reach the North Pole. Naval Officer Robert Peary and black explorer Matthew Henson risk starvation to plant the stars and stripes at the top of the world and win congressional medals of honor. At about the same time, 2,500 blacks are graduated from college, though only some 20 black Americans will be elected to Congress in the next 3 decades. The continuing color line forces black Americans to develop their own businesses, up to 40,000 by 1914. Across the country, mob violence against black Americans in a desperate effort to keep blacks in a subservient position. Almost no police protection anywhere in the nation. Black leaders and sympathetic whites, recognizing that blacks must have equal protection under the law, organized the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, with a black and white board of directors to push for equality in every aspect of American life. Leader of the movement is W.E.B. Du Bois, a writer, professor, historian, and sociologist, the first black Ph.D. from Harvard, and the author of the pioneering works, The Souls of Black Folk and the World and Africa. Soon, the NAACP has 40 branches nationwide, working in cooperation with the Urban League. It stands today widely acknowledged as the chief lobbying, legal, and educational arm in the never-ending fight for civil rights. One of America's earliest leaders in black labor organization is A. Philip Randolph. When the American Federation of Labor pushes for separate unions for whites and blacks, Randolph demands equality for black American workers and is beaten and jailed as the U.S. moves into World War I. But by 1925, Randolph organizes the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, forcing the AFL to grant an international charter for its 35,000 members. It is the first black labor organization with significant bargaining power. New contracts, better pay follow, and the example of Randolph's achievement has wide influence in labor organization over the years. In World War I, training of 500,000 black soldiers is in segregated camps, many in unfriendly southern states. 30,000 blacks finally get into combat in Europe, while thousands of others unload ships at European ports and work in labor battalions. the NAACP pushes for training of black officers. Eventually, about 750 are commissioned to serve only with black troops. The 389th Infantry Regiment from New York, 1,500 black enlisted men and officers, one of the most formidable fighting forces in the war. For 6 unbroken months, continually in the bloody trenches of France, never retreating, winning the Croix de Guerre for every man, the survivors and the dead. Proud black soldiers returning home in 1919 to seek jobs at equal pay for equal work are met with race riots. As the Ku Klux Klan goes on the offensive from New England to Florida, thousands of black families are burned out of their homes. Another great population shift starts in the U.S. during World War I. Eager to find jobs, 1 million black Americans desert ramshackle cabins in the South, where many of them had been exploited sharecroppers, and migrate to crowded black ghettos in the North. Eventually, when the labor supply exceeds demand, blacks are the first fired, which results in widespread hunger. Nevertheless, the Southern black worker becomes an established feature of Northern industrial life, but generally at the lowest economic level. After World War I, James Weldon Johnson, Field Secretary for the NAACP, moves his staff into the South to spread the word about the organization, risking his life to protest lynchings and other violence. This educator, poet, lawyer, writer, and lyricist will be remembered especially as a fighter for human rights. 1922. The impressive Lincoln Memorial is dedicated. The large number of black Americans in the audience are shocked to find that total segregation of the races is required by whites at this historic ceremony, honoring the great emancipator. Black Americans are amongst the hardest hit when the stock market crash of 1929 triggers the Great Depression. Often end on breadlines. But the communist and socialist parties do not attract a sizable black following in their bid for black support. President Roosevelt's New Deal helps fight poverty, crossing color lines. By 1939, the Works Progress Administration is helping blacks to work more steadily. While the Great Depression is battering the black American economy, Mary McLeod Bethune is forcing integration of the medical staff at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Many other hospitals nationwide slowly follow. As a child, she picked cotton in South Carolina, but nothing could stand in the way of her determination to get an education. Eventually, she is to found Bethune-Cookman College for black students, and later, in Florida, sets up the first black hospital that has both black and white nurses and doctors on staff. The influence of this breakthrough spreads through the South. In 1935, her position in history is further ensured with the founding of the important National Council of Negro Women, which is still dedicated to the civil rights of all women. In the late 1930s, America is still committed to a policy of separate but equal facilities for black Americans. Most black colleges are oriented toward industrial training, but many black students want a broad education in the humanities, history, literature, and the sciences. Black students who apply to white graduate schools, however, are rejected without explanation. Black churches make a strong effort in the battle for equality for the entire black community. One church leader is Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, Jr. from Harlem, who organizes boycotts, so-called slowdowns, and other campaigns of resistance to discrimination. An internationally known surgeon, Dr. Charles Drew, pioneers work in the collection, processing, and transportation of huge amounts of blood plasma, which saves hundreds of thousands of lives in Europe and America during World War II. His unique plasma work is the basis for future large-scale Red Cross blood programs around the world. In 1941, he refuses a demand from the armed forces to segregate the blood of black and white donors on the factual basis that black blood and white blood are the same and indistinguishable. and it costs him his position. His vindication comes too late, after he dies in an automobile accident in 1950. Before Pearl Harbor, blacks served only as messmen on Navy ships. One of them, Dory Miller, leaps to a battle station to replace a dead anti-aircraft gunner and shoots down 4 enemy planes attacking the battleship Arizona. He becomes the first black hero of World War II, a war in which black and white troops generally do not fight side by side. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., a superb fighter pilot, commands an all-black group in 1943 that has the essential job of strafing and bombing coastal bases to soften up enemy defenses before the Allied invasion of Europe. Eventually, Davis retires as a 3-star general, the highest-ranking black American in the armed forces at that time. Hundreds of thousands of blacks serve in the Marines, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, decorated for heroism, their graves hallowing the ground in every theater of combat. As casualties increase, black doctors and nurses are integrated in all the services. Black women serve as wrecks and waves. As the end of World War II approaches, there are 1 million black men and women in uniform. Thanks largely to the hard work of the NAACP and President Harry Truman, some black troops are being trained and fighting side by side with their white brothers in arms. Integration in the armed forces later improves considerably, yet it takes until Vietnam for it to become routine. On the home front, although 50,000 blacks work in defense plants in Detroit, side by side with whites, the same whites bitterly oppose living next door to a black family. World War II over, America, despite peace and prosperity, is rife with mob violence, especially in 5 key cities in the South. The NAACP demands that President Truman take action on civil rights. His presidential order calls for fair employment, anti-lynching and anti-poll tax laws, and strengthening civil rights legislation. The Supreme Court finally rules against discrimination in housing. Slowly, things are moving. Dr. Ralph Bunche helps draft the Charter of the United Nations after World War II and becomes the highest-ranking American on the United Nations staff. He later brings about armistices all over the world, including one between Israel and the Arabs, which guarantees Israel's right to exist. For this, he's awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1950. Whitney Young, Jr., a northern black social worker and educator, goes south in the late 1940s to train young blacks for social justice work all over the country. Appointed head of the Urban League in New York, he makes tremendous strides in encouraging black education, especially for children. Percy Julian, a world-famous organic chemist, grandson of an Alabama slave, develops inexpensive drugs to help treat eye diseases and intestinal disorders, and spends the rest of his brilliant career creating a great variety of drugs and chemicals. Internationally known skin specialist Dr. Theodore Lawless makes an outstanding contribution to the treatment of leprosy in the 1950s. His research and treatment techniques remain the basis for the fight against that disease to this day. Finally, in 1954, the Supreme Court decision that racial segregation in public schools is unconstitutional, largely the result of lobbying by the NAACP and other liberal organizations against the old separate but equal position. Results are immediately explosive. Federal troops rush south to help put down the violence against blacks, as 100 Southern congressmen condemned the court decision. In 1957, Governor Orville Faubus of Arkansas sends in the state National Guard to prevent integration of schools in Little Rock. But President Eisenhower swiftly counters with federal troops. The Supreme Court orders withholding of federal funds from schools that do not comply with the law. And very slowly, integration begins to take hold in the South. Enter Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., a 25-year-old minister in Montgomery, Alabama, leader of the nonviolent civil rights movement, who eventually is to be caught between the black militants and the white extremists. Picture a morning in Montgomery in December 1955. Rosa Parks, a young black seamstress, is on her way to work on a bus. When the front of the bus becomes crowded, the white driver orders Miss Parks to move to the rear, give up her seat to a white passenger. When Miss Parks refuses, she's arrested. Boycott the bus lines is Dr. King's message to the blacks in Montgomery. He's arrested, but still urges nonviolence, even when his home is bombed. A local court finds him guilty of conspiracy, but the Supreme Court overturns that ruling. As the months of boycotting go on, Dr. King's followers are often beaten and jailed, 35,000 in only 5 months. Other homes and churches are bombed. But at the end of a year, the bus line gives in, and integrated buses roll along Montgomery streets. Using the event to show the power of passive resistance, King forms the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. He travels to a dozen major southern cities to walk picket lines, join in sit-ins. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, is founded in 1960 to press for the end of Southern resistance to total integration. CORE, the Congress for Racial Equality, is formed. About 1960, sit-ins hit the segregated South, largely in 15 cities with colleges and universities, where black and white students joined the effort. Sitting in at lunch counters and restaurants, arms locked, refusing to leave because blacks are denied service. Demonstrators are arrested by the thousands as students offer no resistance. Simply going totally limp, forcing police to cart them off to jail. Released from jail, they organize peaceful marches, sometimes running into violence from whites wielding clubs. Soon the sit-in technique spreads to many places across the country. But again, it takes about a year for the store owners and authorities to get tired of the problems created. Slowly, very slowly, color lines start to be erased. Interstate segregated buses are challenged by black and white freedom riders. Buses are often burned and gutted, while student passengers, all pledged to nonviolence, are beaten in segregated waiting rooms. The Ku Klux Klan rides in with white hoods and glowing torches. The American Nazi Party attacks with clubs and chains. Chaos as freedom riders are tossed in jail in Mississippi and Louisiana, charged with inciting to riot. But eventually, the cause is won. We are at the dramatic March on Washington in August 1963, a peaceful demonstration by 250,000 blacks and whites from all over the country on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. Gathering at the Lincoln Memorial, speakers stress education, jobs, better housing, and an absolute commitment to the equality of all. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. makes his memorable, moving speech, "I Have a Dream," which is reprinted, quoted, and rebroadcast in newspapers and in radio and television programs around the world. The harrowing 6 decades from 1900 to 1960 saw formation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, active labor unions for blacks, black soldiers serving with valor under fire in 2 world wars, hopeful strides in education, a strong start for the non-violent civil rights movement. And through it all, black Americans continue to make significant contributions in every area of American life.